Hi, my name is Heidi McDonald. I am the graphic novel reviews editor of Publishers Weekly. To my right, I have Leon Avellino of Secret Acres.
Yay!
Then we have Annie Koyama of Koyama Press. And Fox Brown of Retrofit Comics. And John Porcellino of Spit and a Half and King Cat. We're just talking about how you got started as a publisher and you know how you went about it. Of course, and you're probably the old timer on this panel. Actually, you are the the veteran of the apocalypse.
Well, I mean, I self-published my own comic, King Cat. I've been doing that since the late '80s, and for me, I mean, so I self-publish stuff, and I'm working my way into publishing other people's works. But in the '90s, I ran a small press distribution company called Spit and a Half. And what happened with that was there were certain artists that I worked with, like Tom Hart and Jenny Zervakis, Jeff Zenik, whose books I sold out of all the time, and who were not particularly, like I would sell out of it. They're like, hey, can I get 50 more? And then like 3 months later, they'd say, did you ask me for something like 3 months ago? I can't remember. And so like I started taking their masters and actually producing these zines for them just so I could keep them in stock in the distro. And so like in the mid to the late 90s, my plan was to start publishing some book collections of these kind of zine-based comics. And then I got really sick for like 10 years. And so when I got sick, there was just no way. I had to work full-time in order to get health insurance. And I was trying to do my own comics and run the distro and publish these books, and there was just no way I could do it all. So it all just kind of, I decided to focus on my comics because that's, about the only thing I had the energy for. And maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I started slowly bringing the distribution company back. And at this point, like I've got over 350 titles and stuff, and that's kind of what I do, alongside my own work. And so it's just like, there's still these books. I mean, in 1997, when I got sick, I was planning on putting out this collection of Jenny Zervakis' work, and so, it's 15 years later, but hopefully we will get that book out sometime early next year. And so, as far as me being a publisher, I'm interested in self-publishing my own work. That's something I'm really committed to. I have plans to do a new anthology later in the year or earlier in the year that maybe will be an annual kind of thing. And then, like, in terms of the Jenny Zervakis book, it's simply, that's a book that I just don't think will exist unless I do it. So I don't really have any plans on becoming a big publisher or having a huge catalog or anything, but
You're not going to launch a universe?
no. Because then I'd have to relaunch it. So, but it's just a case of there's certain artists out there that I've worked with a long time that I have a personal relationship with. I'll probably do a Jeff Zenik book. And again, it's weird, but these are all things I was talking about 15 years ago. It's just I'm finally in a place where I have the energy and ability to maybe make some of this stuff real.
I think what John said about publishing the work of cartoonists that you like. I mean, that sounds pretty simple. But is there anyone here who does not have that as a major goal? I mean, is that how you? I mean, it seems like that kind of inspired the rest of you just to do things that were, join the club, get those comics out there.
I got some advice. Well, I didn't. My friend Ian got advice from Sammy Harcum. He went to a panel, I think, and Sammy was talking about Kramer's Ergot, and he said, well, what do you do? Like, what's some advice you can give? He just said, make a book that you want to see that doesn't, like the book that you want to read. And I think that, that just never fails. Because then you'll be satisfied. If nothing else, you'll have this book that you wanted.
But you hope that lots of other people will.
Oh, of course.
And that's my hope with every book too. Paid off. There's just too much talent out there you don't know about, and everybody's slaving away.
every day I feel like I see somebody new
Me
that
too.
I'm like, there's only so much you can do. I wish you could do, you wish you could do more.
Like, I mean, with this book I'm talking about, the Jenny Zervax book, I mean, she's been doing comics as long as I have, and, she just self-published these things in little Xerox batches, and, she's got a couple of kids. She's like, teaches at Duke University, or does research for Duke University and stuff. I mean, she has this like super complicated life. And she just, every couple of years she puts out this comic, and I mean, to me, she's like, as a cartoonist myself, she's one of like the handful of people I mean, she's so inspiring to me, her work, and it's just, by the nature of what she does and how she does it, she's unknown. She's nobody knows who this person is. Very few people, and so definitely that's part of it. Is like, I love this stuff, but I obviously I think a lot of people would love it if they were exposed to it. It's very idiosyncratic, but it's also really beautiful, and it deserves to be seen, I think, by people.
Well, let me ask you, what are the biggest obstacles that you have faced as publishers? I mean, you all had, in different ways, this idea, this love, and desire to start making more of this material. So when you got started doing it, what were the obstacles that you faced, or that remain? So stuff problems. That apocalypse. What caused the apocalypse?
Well, I don't know that I agree that there is necessarily an apocalypse, but in terms of the biggest challenges, distribution was a huge pain in the ass for us. The Diamond folks don't really like what we do. There's a huge comic shop market out there, but we have had trouble in the past making inroads into it. Where we seem to shine, I guess, is in the book market. And the minute that we got real book market distribution, that was the big game changer for us, where suddenly these books that we couldn't move were flying away from us.
Who's your book distributor?
Baker and Taylor. Baker and Taylor and Ingram are essentially responsible for something ludicrous, like 80% of the books on Earth between the two of them. They're quite mysterious. I have no idea who actually works at Baker and Taylor, or who deals with our account, or any of that kind of stuff.
I think it's just these two guys, Baker. Everybody knows their first names, but it's like a real small.
Well, one guy cooks, the other guy fixes the suits.
I mean, it's weird. It's like dealing with a robot that just takes our books away. And I'm very happy about it. But that was the hardest part, honestly.
How did you approach them? I mean, because they are huge in the book industry, and how did you put together a package or a submission or talk to someone? Or?
Once we had a certain number of books in our catalog, I think it was 10. We went and started submitting stuff to every book distributor that we could get contact information for. Mostly because, this is bizarre when you think about it. Whatever we publish, B&T will distribute, and they'll take away a good chunk of business. Same thing with Amazon, for better or worse. But Diamond, we have to audition every single time. We have to convince them that our books are actually worth publishing. And half the time they will say no, despite the fact that our books win all kinds of awards and are on NPR's top 5 of the year list, so they can eat it.
There's a lot of competitors. I know I work directly with comic shops a lot. That's how, I have distributed something. My first Xeric book I distributed through Diamond and sold like 400 copies from it, and they took money out of it, and all it really saved me was the time of mailing it out, really. So now when I started Retrofit, I contacted all the shops I knew of that I thought would carry the book, and a lot of them now do. And so I just work directly with the shops, but that's you know, that's another thing you have to do. You know
But
what
it's
I
gotta
mean?
be time consuming.
Yeah, it is.
How many shops do you deal with?
About 20 right now. You know, most of them actually have, since the books come out, like retrofit books come out monthly, so they kind of just set it up like a standing order. So, you know, when a new book comes out, I gotta send whatever, 10 copies to the Beguiling, 20 copies here, 30, you know, whatever, all over. And every little bit, for me, every little bit helps.
Annie, what did you discover? Did you have a
There was
distributor?
distro was the hardest part too, so I approached everyone. I've got toy distributors that have my stuff. I don't do just comics, so I try and, you know, cross over as much as I can. Sometimes you'll get like a toy guy to take a comic, like the other ones. The photography book will be taken and they'll take some of the comics. I have Tony Shenton who's walking around the show, and if you don't know him, you need to appreciate this man because he's out there selling all of our books and working hard. John sells my stuff at every show I can't get to. Leon and Barry sell it. Chris Bitzer used to sell it, Las Gas. But you know, you reach out to every little place you can. I actually am talking to a large distributor right now.
So you're not with Baker Taylor right
I'm
now?
not.
Okay, so, I mean, but obviously that's a goal. Or,
Yeah, just because there's a lot of people who've said, you know, I live in, you know, Baltimore, I'm not near Atomic. Is there some place I can get it? And they'll tell me, I say, well, where's your closest place? And they'll say, oh yeah, it's this place, you know, and then I'll contact them and the guy will say, oh, I only order from Diamond, and I'm not at Diamond. So far, I'm avoiding that.
right.
So I like it.
I mean, so I had a question down here about like if you feel your market is more in bookstores or comic shops or at shows like this. I mean, what do you feel is the breakdown for each of you of how you get your books out there? If you have a sense of it or want to give any numbers.
Well, for us, it's definitely the book market. I mean, that's where all of the major orders come from. There was a point though, 2 years ago, I guess it was, where we were in pretty rough shape. And what turned it around for us was actually hitting the road. We started going to more and more and more shows, and actually it did a lot for us. I mean, we got to meet people we wouldn't otherwise have met. It built an audience all over the country that might not have been aware of Secret Acres in the first place. So that was huge. I don't know that major publishing houses, I don't see Random House here anywhere. I don't know that they get that, and what a difference it makes being actively involved in a comics community. And there is very much a comics community in pretty much every city and some small towns too.
Well, how, I mean, you know, John, again, as doing it in the 90s when, there was an SPX, that was it, maybe an 8, there was SPX an 8, but I mean, now there is an entire indie show circuit. I mean, how important to, there's TCAF, they just launched a show in Chicago. I mean, how important are these shows?
And it's huge. I mean, I think it's one of the major changes. I mean, like the way I describe it, like when I started doing this stuff, like when I started, of course, when I was doing King Cat, but then also running Spit and a Half, maybe like 90% of my orders were directly from people, readers, through the mail. I mean, there wasn't an internet when I started, so like, people would, I had a paper catalog that I would mail out. People could send me a stamp and get it. I had a mailing list that I would send this catalog out to. People would send in their orders. And then at some point there were like, I mean, what was there? There was like Quindy's, there was Comic Relief, See Here, which ripped everybody off in New York City. I mean, those were the only places that sold this stuff. And gradually, one of the big changes was that I think the comics, the larger, comics community began to realize that there was all kinds of stuff going on in the small press that was really high quality. And then more and more stores began. So like the next big change was that like, there was maybe like 10% of my orders were those stores. And now it's reversed. Maybe 10% of my orders are direct through people. The rest of them go to stores. And almost every major city and a lot of the smaller ones have some kind of shop that's supportive of small press stuff. I mean, to the point of carrying photocopy, mini comics and things like that. And the thing with these shows, I mean, as sadly, because I'm a big proponent of comic book shops, you know, and we've seen that retail aspect collapse in a lot of ways over the last bunch of years. And I think these shows have picked up the slack of that to a certain degree for our kind of comics, where, I mean, I'm sure there are people walking around at SPX this year who buy comics once a year. They go to SPX and they blow their wad and they buy however money, $500 or $1,000 worth of comics or whatever they do. And this is because there is no comic shop right now.
It's like going to the craft fair, I mean, you know, in a different way, but I mean, it is, something
Yeah, I
like,
mean,
oh, it's
and it's
coming to
just-
town, so.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it myself. The comic shop I used to go buy stuff is gone. It's been gone for 5 years, or it closed last year, and suddenly, you know, you don't have a place to do it. And I think these shows, and again, these are springing up like that, where, you know, every region, every major city has some kind of small press show. And I try to go to as many of them as I am capable of, you know, and then it's huge.
I think I'm like really thankful of where I live at this point, because there's so many shows up and down the East Coast that I can drive to like a lot of shows, including TCAP, which is, I think I might fly there next year. But we're able to drive kind of everywhere, take buses and whatever. But I think it would be tough. I mean, you're in Denver.
Well, I lived in Denver for many years now. I live outside Chicago.
Oh, right.
You know, and I mean, one of the major reasons I moved to the Midwest was because there's probably a dozen major cities within a day's drive of where I'm at. And, you know, I'm going to Nashville in a couple of weeks for a small press show. You know, I'm going to Milwaukee, I'm going to Minneapolis in the next couple of weeks. So, it's the way it's all comics.
Annie, is it also a place, do you find new talent at shows? I mean, is it important from that standpoint too, or?
I can't say that I have actually found anyone at a show, but I do, every day I'm looking at stuff, and, you know, then you end up working again with certain artists that you already have. So I'm never at a loss for finding people do bring stuff to shows, so you might find a gem, but, yeah.
What in terms of your audience have all you guys found? I mean, you know, like, have you seen the audience evolve in the time that you've been in it? Is it a different makeup, or, you know, is it just broadened, or? You know?
Well, I've only been doing it for about a year, but I mean, I think that having the comics in the shops for me, I get a lot of feedback from people that pick up the books at the shop that are like, I only buy X-Men every week, but this is now in my shop and I bought it and it's awesome, and then they subscribe or something like that. And so that for me is changing, because I was never, I mean, I've had my comics in comic shops before, obviously, but more now.
My collection of stuff is so diverse that at any given show, at any new season when I have stuff, you'll get new people, because someone who doesn't like, you know, somebody's work, Michael DeForges, might love Jesse Jacobs, and then you'll get the people coming back for, do you do another one with Jesse, that kind of thing. But I noticed at the last show that I was at Cake in Chicago, it stood out to me. It was a very young crowd that came. At TCAF, it's a library, it's a public building, so you get everybody, like you get grannies who don't know it's on, who are just walking in, there are people who are studying who don't know it's on, and then dedicated buyers who are coming to look for a specific person. So I think every show is different, but that's what makes it great.
I mean, Cake was based out of the arts school, so it might have been a lot of students and stuff like that. That was a great show. I really liked Cake this year.
What about it creatively? I mean, have you seen, I mean, obviously you all do have, you know, people, like you say, that you love working with. I mean, have you seen creatively and you know, changes that are, you know, affecting you, or, you know, trends?
Yeah, there's been for when we first started, Jesus, 6 years ago now, pretty much all of the submissions that we were getting were very much in the Fourth Thunder style, where everything was, you know, pretty swampy and things, and there were lots of creatures wandering around in semi-silence and all sorts of stuff like that, and that seems to have gone away. And then there's I'm gonna, I'm blaming you.
Yeah,
I'm blaming
it's my
you.
fault. I get a lot of
Exactly.
porny stuff.
Yeah.
Gay porn stuff. I get, as my sister calls them, you're not doing another one of those drippy penis ones. So I'm actually branching out into kids comics. So drippy penis ones here and then the stuff here. And inevitably, the kid that comes to the table will go right and pick up the penis.
Yeah.
So you have
That's
to
where kids'
watch.
comics come from.
Sorry.
That was your fault, though, I swear to God.
I know, but I have to say that I think the porn stuff is, if you'll excuse the thing, it's
It's
dropping off.
crushing, yeah.
I think it's
No.
Yeah.
Too messing. One thing I want to say earlier, and I would like to say it before I forget, but is one thing that I have definitely noticed in my, like, doing the distro, well over half of my orders come from overseas at this point. So, and that's something that is a huge change. And I mean, I think it's due to a couple things. I mean, certainly it's due to the internet. I always had overseas customers and things like that. They're very few and far between. It was always difficult to get the money transferred and this and that. People use PayPal all over the world, and the internet has really turned this into an international community. And it's more than the North American,
Yeah.
Canada and the U.S. I mean, there's scenes in France and Sweden and Finland and Italy and Belgium that are super vital, and you're seeing a huge amount of transference between those people over there and us over here in terms of influence and things like that. And so I think that's something that's pretty notable too. Like that's a pretty major change that I think is pretty cool.
I think also right now there's like a really vibrant comic scene coming up in the UK, and so I have a lot of orders going over to the UK. In Australia too. Every once in a while you get like an Australian cartoonist that's just like mind blowing, and you share the common language. It's really good.
So this post-apocalyptic landscape looks pretty good.
Yeah, honestly, as like a self-publisher, person who's interested in DIY and small kind of sustainable movements, I feel more confident about comics now than I have probably ever. I mean, I think that there are major changes afoot, but I think that those changes are going to benefit the artists, and I think it benefits small publishers, people who are doing very niche kind of things, boutique kind of things, and it's going to be weird probably, and there's going to be a lot of adapting that's going to take place, but ultimately I think that a lot of what I see coming is going to turn out to be pretty good.
Wow.
I'm optimistic too.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out a couple topics without which any publishing panel would not be complete, and then we're going to open the floor to questions. So the first is digital. Is anyone interested in digital? Does anyone have digital plans?
I do. I think
I do.
digital, everybody was afraid of digital, and I was talking to Ben, who owns or works at the Comic Post, maybe owns it, or I'm not sure. We were talking about how a few years ago everyone was so scared of digital, like it was the scariest thing, and now I feel like it's just a piece of the market. That's good. I mean, any way that people want to read comics, I'd be happy to provide it to them in that way. I also think, though, that ebooks are more powerful when there's an actual object as well. Like, I think that if I just put out an ebook tomorrow, it wouldn't have as much value as if there was a mini comic also, that you can just get it on digital. So, I don't know, that's my 2 cents on digital.
I'm lagging behind because I'm waiting, because I love the actual craft of the book, and I like the feel of the book. And any resolution I've seen so far has been pretty crummy. I really don't want to have that out there, so I'm prepared to wait until it's maybe a little better. I am talking to a couple artists about doing it, but I am totally not convinced that I think that if you don't like a book digitally, you're not going to buy the book anyway, so I don't think you will lose that audience. I would like to have a head start with the actual book first for sales, and just because it's my preferred way of reading.
I think that's totally true also. Like, I've done a few things where I've taken books that are out of print and do digital. It's just an extra thing. People still want it, and
I mean, yeah, I just noticed a story the other day where they're gonna put all these bookmaking machines around, so, yeah, all that stuff. I'm gonna throw the other word out there, Kickstarter. Has everyone heard of Kickstarter here? Yeah, what do you guys think of Kickstarter?
I have a prepared response for them. So I recently did a Kickstarter, and but I pre-sold all these books. But I want to remind everybody here that the money that I used to pay the printing bill came from selling weed. The Kickstarter was a pre-sale. But I just don't think there's a million things you can talk about Kickstarter, and everybody's got an opinion on what it is. But I think that if it makes a book happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise, it's a positive.
I'm a one-person company, and so I'd like to publish a lot more people than I could. I'd like to be able to afford to do it, however I can't. So it's a way I'm quite good. I've got many projects because it's a small way to help somebody get their book out there, and hopefully we'll actually kickstart them to, getting another book, getting a publisher from that. I'm hoping, sometimes they just do a run and then that's the end of it. That's not what I hope you would do with Kickstarter, that you would have some that you could walk around and go and promote yourself with it and
I remember
get your name out there.
when I was doing the Kickstarter, the original Kickstarter for Retrofit, I remember thinking, I'm actually going to use this to kickstart myself. I did.
So that's what
Did you, but you used Kickstarter to start Retrofit, right? That
Yeah,
was what,
the
and that was
original.
like in the early, Pleistocene days of Kickstarter, so,
6 months.
now.
Yeah. The salad days.
Yeah, right, but I mean, now it's just become Leon, would you ever do a Kickstarter?
No, I would sooner cut off my own head. I'm a publisher. We're a publishing company, and that's what we do. If we don't take risks, if we don't back our artists, if we don't find them an audience, we don't need Kickstarter. We have no business.
But do you object to an artist that you can publish, who you'd love to publish, but can't do it otherwise, doing their own Kickstarter?
No, I don't. I mean, we've said this a million times, but we don't really publish books, we publish artists. So when we publish someone, we mate for life. Whatever you got, we're going to publish. That's our job. Our job is to support you. It's not even to provide people with products. I mean, yes, we publish really pretty books, and we're happy that so many people love reading them, and that part of it is great, but we have no right to use Kickstarter.
To be honest with you, I mean, if say like, if say Drum Quarterly tomorrow wanted to do a Kickstarter, let's say, I mean, somebody who has a big, huge clout like that, they could do a Kickstarter that, not to publish a book, but like they could do anything. Like you know what I mean? Like it's just an option there that people could use to do something crazy, to do something out of the reach of normal. The other thing also to consider is that people do find work through Kickstarter. Like Kickstarter has its own community and its own people that, sift through these projects and find new comics that way. Not a ton. I mean, the Secret Prison 7 Kickstarter, I think maybe like 10% came through Kickstarter. And I don't know if that was exactly how they found out about it, but that's 10% of those people that maybe never heard of our work before and now do. So
Well, that part of it is fine. I don't have a problem. We supported and donated to many Kickstarter projects. We like the idea of there being more comics, and as a resource for artists and people who are self-publishers and that kind of stuff, or even smaller outfits like yours, that makes sense. But our booths are not for sale. We we're supposed to know what we're doing. It's not like, it's not like we're asking for help here to find the means to produce these books. That's our job. We're not gatekeepers, we're not tastemakers. We're here to support our artists. That's how it works. And you know, if Kickstarter is a means for other artists to find support or find a readership, that's great. And we're totally behind that. But we find the idea of larger publishing houses, just talked about this,
No names.
using Kickstarter to fund or market their books is kind of ridiculous. They need to get out of the way, honestly. The people who are using Kickstarter who should be using it are artists and smaller groups. I really don't care to see people with enormous resources taking advantage of what is not rightfully theirs.
John, any thoughts on the topic of the day? I don't mean to put you on the spot there.
I don't really understand a lot of that stuff. I try to follow it, and my opinion usually changes on a daily basis. Like Box was saying, I think it's great if like somebody has this amazing project that they just can't get the resources for somehow to use this forum to generate interest and support for this project. I can't say it's a bad thing. I think that the potential for misuse is very strong. And as somebody who's been self-publishing all these years, I used to work shitty jobs and keep track of my hourly pay, and every 15 minutes I'd be like, okay, I can print 20 more copies of King Cat because I just loaded this truck for the last 15 minutes. And I think that I'm not saying that you need to suffer that way, but I think that there's some value in being, self-sufficient and making sacrifices for your work. I think it teaches you a lot about yourself and about your work, and not that people who use Kickstarter aren't sacrificing in ways, and I'm probably too ignorant to really have an opinion, but that's the one thing that it kind of strikes me is you used to be able to put out books on your own. You just had to really figure out how you were going to make this happen, and you had to really have that passion to make it happen. It was not easy to do, but if you had that passion, you could find ways to do it, and you didn't have to ask for assistance. And but again, I don't stand by anything I say here. I'm very confused by the whole thing.
Right. I think a lot of people are,
I've heard the whole Kickstarter thing that's going on now compared to what is known as black and white glut. Was a period in the 90s, you know what I'm talking about?
I was there.
Okay, right. It's after, I guess, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a huge success, and all these other publishers came out and saw, oh, well, we just put these black and white comics out, we can make a lot of money, and it flooded the market with a lot of stuff that maybe wasn't so good, which is maybe what, I think people see Kickstarter as kind of that right now.
Sure.
In some ways.
As a distributor, and I always, again, have to be very cautious about how I say this and how I feel about it, because as a DIY, I've based my whole life on this attitude of everybody has a voice, everybody has a right to express themselves, and to me, some of the most beautiful expression is coming from that world. But also, as a distributor, it's a little bit better now, but there was a point where I was probably getting 5 times as many submissions as orders. You know what I mean? And it's becoming easier to make really pretty books that have higher price tags, and I just because that's so, you can't lose sight of the fact that it's what's inside the book that counts, and I always talk to like younger cartoonists who are, like, well, I have this great idea for this 600-page graphic novel. I'm gonna put it out in 3 installments every 2 years or whatever. I'm like, well, why don't you, that's great. Good luck, but like, why don't you start with like a 32-page mini comic and like work out what you want to say and how you want to say it before you tackle this gigantic thing. And I don't know, I'm rambling now, but yeah, I do. There is that aspect of it. Of this. I mean, it's just crazy. Like when you're asking, like, what kind of changes have you seen? But I mean, the basic change is like when I started doing this stuff, there were like 15 people in the country, and we all knew each other, and like, and now it's there's thousands and thousands of people, and there's like schools giving people degrees in comics and all this stuff. I mean, it's just the change is massive, and in many ways, I think it's great.
And it's reason to be hopeful, as you
Yeah,
said.
but there probably is let's face it, there's a lot of stuff out there that I get these books in the mail with full color covers and stuff, and it's like, you know what? If this had been a mini comic, I would have loved it. And,
Well, yeah. Anyway, I want to see if there's any questions out there. Anybody got any questions? Yeah, in the back there. Okay.
I was just sort of wondering what you guys think of models sort of like, I never say the name right, Patico, which is sort of like a high-grade distributor. They publish their own work as well, and they're a merchandise company. They ship out plush stuff and prints and that sort of thing.
I think Patico is great. I mean, I haven't worked with them before. From what I understand, they're really artist friendly, and I think I've talked a little bit with Jeff, and he's I find him to be the guy who runs Patico. I find him to be a really inspiring guy because he kind of just saw all his friends making these great comics and kind of doing the same thing and figured out a way to get it all together and kind of do it more efficiently and get it out there. I think Patico is great.
I think there's room for all kinds of models, so I think it's fantastic.
Well, I'm a little divided about Patico. I think it's a fantastic business model. I was running through their website, and they have this thing where they basically don't want any submissions from anybody who doesn't get, it was something ludicrous, like 100,000 uniques a day. And that doesn't speak to me of someone who's really into it for the art. If that's already a qualification, then I question your dedication to the medium.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, in the front.
Like, there's another one-word or one-term prompt, just thoughts or opinions on print on demand.
You mean like, well, you mean digital printing?
Yeah.
I think it's fine for certain books. I don't really like the quality of the way digital printing looks sometimes. So, but I think it's fine. To be honest with you, for my aesthetically, for me, I kind of prefer photocopy mini comics.
Me too.
But that might just be aesthetics. I don't know.
So far. I'd rather have a Xeroxed, almost poorly trimmed zine type thing, or jump to the offset or the risograph stuff. I don't like the quality of it, and they're not consistent. I did a test run for a couple of things on a photography book with Aaron Layton in Toronto, and we did 2 within 2 months, and the colors were so drastically different on the 2 batches. You couldn't actually display them at the table at the same time. Yeah. Anyway, apparently it's gotten somewhat better, but it's expensive too.
It is really expensive.
You don't want to gamble and have that discrepancy.
I like the idea. As long as the quality is there, I think it actually makes a lot of sense. That's one of, speaking of challenges in the beginning, we didn't know what the hell we were doing when we were putting together orders for books. So the idea of having some kind of inventory control is a welcome thing. I'm into that. That would be fun.
Any other questions up there? Yeah, here.
I've got, has Amazon made any difference to your distribution? And second question, how big is the library market for you compared to the regular readers?
Amazon doesn't affect me really at all. I don't really use them.
I don't actually use them yet, and I'm not really in libraries yet because you have to have a certain, you have to be in a certain, you know better. Yeah, I don't have the distro background to be in it yet, but I'm trying to be.
I sell some of my old books that I have bought through Amazon, and they don't give you enough money for shipping. So
We move a lot of books through Amazon, a lot of books through Amazon. They're really great for us. I'm not too proud of this for obvious reasons. There's a moral conflict involved in all of it.
Let me just say, and of course there is a moral conflict and it's weird and but I mean, like right now I live in a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. You would have to drive probably 50 miles to find a bookstore. And there's a lot of people who live like that. And putting aside the discounting and the effect it's having on bookstores, there's a purpose that's served there. I mean, I always talk about like when I was growing up in the Chicago suburbs, there were no bookstores. And Borders moved in for the period that Borders was around, and of course, Borders, it did a lot of harm to the independent bookstore, but for people who lived in that suburb of Chicago, it made books available to them. And so, yeah, there's a give and take there, and it's not like a completely evil thing. I think it serves a pretty beneficial purpose for a lot of people out there.
I use the Canadian version for that reason.
Another one is for library stuff. Some of our books are really popular with libraries.
Which ones?
Troop 142 is perpetually being bought by libraries. I think that had a lot to do with the young adult library the ELSA award nomination. We all seem to get in trouble with that one. There's some risky behavior, I guess, in Troop 142, and I think a lot of people don't like the idea of talking to their kids about stuff.
Yeah. Although one of my friends who was in Boy Scout camp in New Jersey, he said it's completely accurate.
Well, that's the thing, is it probably is. I don't doubt for a second that most kids out there are behaving in a similar way. I just think it's difficult for parents in particular who actually look at what their kids read to access some of that. I think it's hard. You don't want to think of your kid being so badly behaved. So that's his place.
I think we are coming to the end. I want to go down the panel and I want to ask you two questions. And compressed, unfortunately, because we only have about 10 minutes left. But I want to ask first, number one, what is a book that you published here at the show that is very special to you and you would like to talk about? Just mention it. And number two, what is the next frontier for your own publishing company? So Leon, you go first.
Ooh,
You only get one.
You could maybe mention more than one. Yeah, no, you could mention two, but yeah, just mention something. That deserves more attention.
in a weird way, Curio Cabinet I'm really attached to. With John Brodowski, the artist behind it, was the first person we ever actually met when we were talking about starting a company. I love that book. I think it's really wonderfully odd, and I wish to God it had come out when we had book market distribution, because it kind of got dropped a little bit. But yeah, that book means a lot to me. I'm very proud of that one. What was the other question?
The next frontier.
Jesus, we just opened an office, and our furniture and crap is in there, but it's not actually up and running. But it's kind of a big deal for us. It's a huge commitment,
awesome.
and I'm terrified of having to live up to it, but it's good, I guess.
I have Julia Wertz's new book, and she's a level above the emerging people I normally work with, so that's pretty exciting for me that she would come to me and take a chance on a small publisher. So that's great. I have Michael DeForge's Boost 4, and you know, that's the Kickstarter thing. That series has kickstarted him to, you know, he's going to have the Ant book out with B&Q next year. There will be more with other people, and he'll do more with me, but that's what I mean. That's why I made my company, and so it's incredibly satisfying. And also I get to introduce the Team Society League goofball guys with their gag jam comics to you, and you should come and check out that book because it's pretty hilarious and incredibly beautifully drawn. You might miss it for the gags. What is next is, maybe by next fall, I see a lack of weirdo kids comics in the market. I don't mean, there's so many beautiful children's books, so I'm not going there, but I would like to have the people who will grow up to read Boost, I want them to have the kid version of that stuff. So I'm working on a bunch of those. I'm excited.
I published this big manga anthology. It's 20 really great alternative cartoonists working right to left, and it's called Secret Prison 7, and we have Phlox, #1 by Ellen Nichols, and New Sludge City by Brendan Leach. And next year, I have 6 books scheduled for next year by a bunch of artists that I love: Ryan Cecil Smith, Simon Morton, Roman Murdoff, Sophia Foster DeMino, and 2 more people I can't remember right now. But we're going to be on, I might start a magazine next year too, so.
Well, right now I only publish my own stuff, so I feel a little bit funny saying that. But I do have a couple things from the distro that I feel really strongly about, and one of them is a book called After School Special by this guy Dave Kirsch, who's been making comics for a long time. I've been reading his comics since he was probably like 14 years old, and I've seen him develop as an artist, and it sounds like hyperbole, but I really do think he's like a great American artist. I think he writes about a very particular aspect of American society and culture, and he does it in a very idiosyncratic way. And this new book of his is, which was Kickstarted, by the way, I really feel like it's the culmination of almost everything that he's been working on his whole career. And, you know, so I feel, this is a guy who I think is like criminally underappreciated. I also have some new material by the Canadian artist Pascal Girard, who he has a book called Apartment Number 3 that he self-published that I think so far is probably my favorite comic of the year. And I've gotten some copies of that at the table. And as far as what in the future, I don't know. Spit Half keeps growing. I've got 350 titles, and it's getting pretty close to where like my brain can't keep track of it all. And so I think that my distro serves a purpose. I mean, I'm able to get a lot of good comics into people's hands, and so I'm at the point where I feel like I either have to think about like how am I going to manage this and like keep it at this level, or how am I going to continue to grow it. And so I kind of either I probably need to find some people to help me out with it, you know, or lose my mind. But I'm hoping, you know, I think it serves a good purpose. When I gave up the distro in the 90s, it broke my heart. So it feels amazing to be doing it again. And, you know, so hopefully, yeah, the future is good. It's just a matter of adapting and learning.
I guess the takeaway from this panel is the post-apocalyptic landscape looks fairly hopeful, very hopeful, actually. And also, I just hear people saying, I think to all of you out there, I just give a note. I mean, John saying he needs some help. I mean, I think there's a lot of room out there if you want to, you know, for people to help out and, you know, do things. And it's really a time when you can get things done. You know, and so I think there's a lot more to come. And please do go by the table of all 4 of our panelists, all of them just publishing so much great stuff. So thank you for coming. Thank you guys for being on here. And,